Yes.
Okay, we are on chapter 26. This chapter talks about how plants control their growth and movement. And yeah, I can only spend one day on this chapter, so I'm not going to get too involved here.
Is this going to be on the AP exam? Or
could be. Any of this could be. But they don't focus too much on these plant stuff anymore, so I only spend a day per chapter. I'll just show you some of the things. The way plants control their movements often involves hormones.
26 or 27?
This is chapter 26.
Okay.
And there are different types of hormones, but a hormone is basically a molecule. And you can see this molecule here that fits into some receptor that's on the surface of the cell. And here we see the hormone fitting into the receptor. And then what happens when this receptor, can you guess what kind of molecule that receptor is on the surface of the cell?
Protein.
It's a protein. When that protein picks up that hormone, that's called reception. And then there's something that occurs in response to that. And the transduction part is the mechanism that leads to the response. And so we call it, perhaps there's a molecule attached to this receptor. And when the hormone attaches to that protein, that molecule breaks free and maybe binds to some other enzyme that's here in the cytoplasm. And that eventually causes some kind of cellular activities. It might be something in the mitochondrions doing something. It might be something happening in the nucleus. Something goes on in response to these hormones. One of the things plants will do is they'll bend toward the light, or they'll bend away from gravity. Here, somebody knocked over a plant, and you can see the plant starts growing upward if you give it a few days. The plant is growing away from gravity, and that's called a gravitropism. A fun thing to do when your folks go out of town is to lay all their plants on its side. And then the day before they come back, set all the plants back up straight. And they will all be leaning like this.
What's it called? Gravitropism?
Gravitropism. And then when your folks come back, they go, what happened to all the plants? And you go, Look at this, it's a corn seed. And you can see the root growing downward. And the stem is going to start growing upward. Do you think that is a root or a stem?
Root.
That's a root because it's growing downward, you see. The roots grow down and the stems grow up. And these have to do with hormones acting inside the root and inside the stem. And I'll show you how that works in just a second. Here's some cool video footage showing some plant movements.
A main characteristic of living things is their ability to respond to a stimulus. Plant stems respond to light by growing toward its source. This is called phototropism. Plant roots respond to gravity. A simple experiment shows that roots always respond to gravity by growing down. This is called gravitropism. Some plant movements don't seem related to a response. These are called nastic responses. For example, some climbing plants grow in a series of rhythmic movements that help the plant find a support up which it can grow.
How cool is that? See, this one just swings around until it hits something.
That's really cool.
Of course, that's time-lapse photography. In reality, if you saw this plant, it would just look like that, and you wouldn't think anything about it. But very slowly, it's growing around like this.
Like the time lapse.
What What's the opposite of gravitropism?
The opposite?
Not maybe the opposite.
Phototropism is another type of tropism. That's
Yeah.
growth toward the light.
So it
And then
makes the
there's-
hormones.
Wait a second.
Observe how these plants bend toward the light. Now let's see what happens when that light is turned out, and another light is turned on at the opposite side.
That is so cool.
This response of bending toward the light is called phototropism.
That is
Here we're going to observe the effects of a plant's response to gravity. This response is called geotropism. When a plant is turned from its normal growing position, the roots will again grow downward, exhibiting a positive response toward gravity. Roots tend to grow toward the center of the earth, whereas stems show a negative response and grow away from it.
Question, yes, Dante.
Have you ever seen a commercial for those like, what do you call it, where you grow the tomatoes and it's upside down?
Oh yeah.
Is that a bad idea then?
I don't know.
'Cause it's
I don't know what those
originally
are. I've seen it, but I don't know how it works.
So what's the third thing, like the nascent response?
Nastic movements.
Nastic.
Nastic movements are just plant movements that aren't in a particular direction. It's not like it's toward the light or away from the light, or toward gravity or away from
So they
gravity.
just don't have this.
It's a move. It's just a kind of a general term for a plant movement is a nastic movement.
N-A-S-T-I-C.
That's correct.
So what causes them, or what creates the hormones?
Okay, well, the hormones are created in the phloem of the plant by cells. Different plant organs can create these hormones. And let me just show you how they work. These little things, if you look in some plant cells, in the developing root and stem, for instance, you see these little black dots. Do you see them there? Those are heavy grains, you see, and they're pulled down by gravity. So this way the plant kind of knows which way gravity is. And so those are individual plant cells with these hard, heavy structures go down, and that's the way it knows which way is down. An experiment to figure out why it then grows down was done. Wait, hold on. Let me show you this video, and then I'll show you how the hormones work.
Ferocious spines, painful stings, poisonous sap, near perfect disguise. Plants seem to have evolved every conceivable defense for their leaves, which by their very nature have to be spread wide to catch the light and are therefore very visible. But this plant, the sensitive mimosa, common beside tropical roadsides, has perhaps the most radical and certainly the most dramatic solution of all. One touch makes it fold its leaflets. Another tap, and it flops to the ground. How does that help? Well, watch how a hungry leaf-eating grasshopper gets on. Obviously, there's a splendid meal ahead. But before it even takes a bite, the meal vanishes.
I've seen this before.
How is a plant like that not like alive? Like I know it's obviously
They're the ones that
alive,
benefit public.
but how is it like? I feel like a plant like that has to like think.
They're the ones that benefit public because
Yeah, they do it without thinking, and that's the important thing. These are called. That's an example of a nastic movement, though. The dropping and the closing of the leaves. It's not in any particular direction. It's just some
We should have
reaction.
a purpose.
Let's talk about different plant movements work in different ways, but let's talk about the growth toward the light. That's called phototropism, growing toward the light.
Must be dying.
And how does that happen? Well, a famous experiment showed how this works. And the guy that did this, I think his name was Fritz Wendt. It shows it on the bottom of page 485. Maybe it wasn't Fritz Wendt.
Fritz one.
Was it Fritz Wendt?
There's like a paragraph on the right side right above it.
The bottom right hand paragraph.
Yes, Fritz Wendt. Yeah, it was. What he did was he took here's a germinating seed of some plant, and here's the stem that's growing up, and the roots growing down. What he did was he wanted to see how this stem's going to grow, and he cut the tip off of it. And the tip of the plant, the end of the plant, now that he cut it off, he set it on top of an auger block. And the auger that he had a whole, he had it set up, and it had a whole bunch of tips on the end that he had cut off, not just one, but several. And what happened was the hormones that were in the tip there sunk into the auger. And they show that in this picture by having the tips being purple. And now, after some time has gone by, the auger is purple. Do you see that? Y'all know what auger is, right? It's that stuff that we've grown bacteria on. It's like
Who did this?
wax. A guy named Fritz Wendt. And now the auger is full of plant hormone, basically. And then what he did was he cut the auger into little blocks, and he would set the auger cubes back on top of the plant. But he would only sit them on one side, on one half of the cut tip. And sure enough, when he watched that plant grow, it would bend away from the cut half. It would curve. The growth of the stem would curve. And what he had done here is he had isolated the first type of plant hormone that was ever discovered. It's called growth hormone. That's plant growth hormone. And growth hormone in plants is also called auxin, or IAA, which stands for indoleacetic acid. This is plant growth hormone. Plant growth hormone.
So it's IAA.
IAA is another name for it. It's also called auxin.
I don't understand why it goes away when you put that on.
That's what I'm gonna explain here. If you only put the growth hormone on one side of the plant, what the growth hormone does is it tells the cells, are y'all watching here? It tells the cells to elongate, the plant cells to get longer. That's what the growth hormone does. And so, let's say I put growth hormone just on my right side, which he's basically done when he puts that auger block on half the plant. Let's say I'm a plant. Jessica, you hanging with me? I'm a plant and I put hormone on this side. You know what's going to happen to this side of my body? It's going to get longer. And I'm going to bend over this way. And I'm going to be walking around like this. Hey, what's up? What are you doing? I just put some growth hormone just on one side of me. You see what I'm saying? Now if I put growth hormone on the other side, then I grow back. So, that's what he's done here. And so, that gave him some idea into why the plants bend toward the light. Let's look at this video one more time, because it's so cool.
Observe how these plants bend toward the light. Now let's see what happens when that light is turned out, and another light is turned on at the opposite side. This response of bending toward the light, is called phototropism.
Okay, so based on what I just told you about growth hormone, what do you think's happening inside that plant?
Making it on one side.
Growth hormones are only going to one side where the light is.
Are they going to the side where the light is?
Or the
No, the
opposite.
other
Grows
side.
on the dark side.
They're on the other side, that's right. So what happens is when the light is shining on this side of the plant, the cells on the side that are dark
Bro.
are creating with their ribosomes growth hormone. And the growth hormone causes the cells to elongate on the dark side. The dark side, Luke. Use the force. So on the dark side, the cells elongate, plant bends towards the light. Because on the dark side, the cells are manufacturing growth hormone. There is some signal that the cell picks up. Some signal coming from the light that stops the manufacture of the hormone. And so on the dark side is where the hormone is manufactured. What if the seed is buried and the plant is underground? What do you think's going on? Since there's no light shining on it. There's equal amounts of hormones, and so what's it going to be? It's not going to grow on this side or that side. It's going to go straight up, right? And then when the light comes out, when it comes out, and the light's over here, then it'll grow toward the light. Because somehow the light shuts off the hormone, you see, shuts off production of the hormone.
How do like we get growth hormone out of plants? Like, is it the same? Or like, you know how like
Human growth hormone is
it's
different
totally
from plant growth hormone, yeah. You give yourself plant growth hormone, nothing will happen. You got to give yourself human growth hormone to make you grow. So let's see what happens with the growth hormone. Here's what happens. The growth hormone, some of the plants on the shady side are producing the growth hormone. And growth hormone comes out of these cells and will bind to membranes of other cells. So follow me here. This is a plant cell. Do you recognize this as a plant cell? It's got hormone receptors. There's one of them. And here, these blue blocks are the growth hormone. And the hormone receptor grabs the growth hormone. And then a number of things happen. And it shows it. It talks about it in your book. This is the picture I have on the board is from the old book. The new book on page 484 is where the picture is. It shows at the bottom what goes on. Trying to see if this is. I don't see it anywhere. Well, anyway, what goes on here after the hormone attaches, there is a signal that goes into the nucleus of the cell. There is a protein that is released that binds to another protein, and those enter the cell, and those cause the cell to transcribe the DNA and end up making what are called growth factors that cause the cell to elongate. And, you know, cells have rigid cell walls, so they can't easily elongate. But what happens is, part of the cell, when it receives this protein, it'll pump hydrogen ions through special proton pumps outside the membrane into the cell wall. It shows it up close here. It shows hydrogen ion, that's a hydrogen ion. ATP is being used to pump hydrogen ions into the cell wall area. Do you know what it's called when we have a bunch of hydrogen ions in one place?
Acidic.
It's acidic. It's an acid. That's what an acid is, a bunch of hydrogens in one place. So here we pump a bunch of hydrogens out. Outside the cell gets real acidic, and it breaks down the cell wall. The cell wall is rigid here, but after there's hydrogen ions everywhere, it stops being rigid so that the cell can stretch. And the cell will grow inside of its body and stretch. It talks about it in several places in the chapter. This picture is not in your chapter, it's in the old book. But that's an example of the nucleus makes these growth factors that helps the cell grow and make new stuff, new cytoplasm, so that the cell can get bigger. And the cell wall is broken down by hydrogen ions so that the cell can stretch.
Wait, what does the oxidant have to do with the hydrogen plus?
Somehow the oxidant, when it binds to this protein, it starts a chain reaction that makes hydrogen be pumped out.
What binds to it?
And the specifics of that mechanism they don't talk about, so
Okay.
it's probably pretty detailed. Yes?
What's the thing that's binding to it?
Okay, that is auxin, that's the growth hormone.
Oh, right.
And that binds to the receptor on the cell's surface there. So that's an example of a plant growth hormone acting. We're going to talk about animal growth hormones later and get more into how they act, but auxin is a plant growing hormone. There's another type called gibberellin. Gibberellin. These are plant growth hormones. And ethylene.
Oh my god.
No, wait, not ethylene. Cytokinin. I don't know. I don't know if you'll have to know those or not. What they'll probably do is they'll probably give you an experiment that they did. And they'll say gibberellins were used to help the plant grow, so they'll probably tell you. But it might help you understand the question if you've heard those words before. You know what I'm saying?
They're just other groups.
These are all auxins, gibberellins, and cytokinins are all plant growth hormones. Look at this. This plant was given gibberellins. And look how long its flower stems grew. And this plant was not. Farmers can make their crops grow bigger and faster using these plant hormones, and they often do. This is, there's two plant growth inhibiting hormones. These are growth hormones. And there are also growth inhibiting hormones.
Why would you want that?
Ethylene and abscisic acid. Abscisic acid. These are growth inhibitors. They stop growth. And plants can stop their growth. Give me a time of year, if you're a plant, that you don't want to be growing.
Winter.
Why wouldn't you want to be growing in the winter? Let's grow in the winter. It'd be fun. So plants can survive in the cold.
Ow, windy.
What's the main reason you don't want to grow in the winter? It's not from, well, the temperature could have something to do with it. Freezing. What's that?
Light.
There's not much light in the winter. Days are only 6-7 hours long in some places. Some places not at all. Why try to grow when there's no light? So plants will often shut down in the winter. Also, if you drop your leaves in the winter, you don't have to worry about them collecting snow and then breaking the branches from all the added weight. So why not just stop growing in the winter, drop the leaves, and be done with it? There's a special hormone that does that. It's called ethylene. Ethylene is found in fruit. Ripened fruit has a whole lot of ethylene in it. And that makes the fruit fall from the tree. It makes the fruit get ripe and then fall from the tree. The ethylene does. And so if you take a piece of fruit and you stick it in this beaker that has a growing twig, all the leaves fall off. Because the ethylene is a gas and it leaks out of the fruit, you see. Especially if you were to break the skin of the fruit. Have you ever heard the statement, one bad apple spoils the bunch? Because if you take an apple, you take a bunch of apples you just picked, and one of the apples is bad, it has a broken surface, ethylene gas will leak out of that, go into all the other apples, and make them ripen faster than they would have.
Wait, so that's an apple in there?
That's an apple.
Oh, I thought that was like a giant berry.
No, that's an apple.
That grew like through all the...
No, see, they
Super berry.
here's where it started, and then they stuck the apple in here, and then the leaves fell.
Yeah, I was wondering why it was a...
You thought maybe one of these berries had grown.
Yeah, I was wondering how it was
humongous.
an inhibitor.
I guess when you first look at it, they probably should have used a green apple or something. I don't know. Anyway, not interesting?
That's really neat. That explains why, like, the peach tree my grandparents have, they always fall off, and all the bees come and eat them all, and they all rot.
Yeah, the timing of dropping, of leaf dropping and apples, fruit dropping is all governed by these hormones. And so there's some mechanism, a hormone is emitted, somehow the hormone goes into the base of the leaf and the cells there, I don't know, wither or something, and it causes the leaf to fall off. The mechanisms, exactly how they work, are sometimes very complicated. We're not going to spend the time talking about exactly how these plant hormones work, all the different steps. We're going to do that with animal hormones, which they tend to stress more on the AP test. But I just wanted you to know that there are plant hormones, and their levels can be measured, and you can experiment on them, and so forth. Plants can keep track of day or night, too. Some plants flower when the day is short. We call them short day plants. Some plants flower when the day is long. We call them long day plants. And it all depends on the length of night and day. In the book, they talk about that at the end of this chapter. And this picture's on page 496. This bar here represents day length. And if the day length is past some critical length, some plants will flower, like this cocklebur.
It's like batteries.
I don't know what type of plant this is, but so this plant flowers when the day is long, and some plants flower when the day is short. So different plants have different mechanisms. But plants can sense day length, and they use a pigment that changes according to the day length.